Welcome to the Balanced Blueprints podcast, where we discuss optimal techniques for health and finances and then break it down to create an individualized and balanced plan. I'm your host, John Proper, here with my co-host, Justin Gaines. In this episode, Justin and I talk about part 2 of the psychology of food. If you haven't listened to part 1, we suggest listening because in this episode, we take a deeper dive into how your mind affects certain biological mechanisms that changes your biology. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you enjoy. And that's a perfect segue into how these things kind of work into the body. So I'll use that if that's good, because we always think of diabetes or insulin resistance as a food problem. And we'll go into some of the pathways here of just literally how chronic mental stress can cause it, which is...
Well, it's like if you don't think you have a problem, you might not have a problem.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? But like you have these people who like eat terrible, on paper, they're terrible diets, high sugar, they should have type 2 diabetes. Like there's just,
yes.
Like, how do they not have type 2 diabetes? But if they don't see it as a problem, this is suggesting that if they don't see it as a problem, it might not be a problem for them.
Right. And long term, I can't fully get behind the idea that the mind can outpower everything else, but I definitely think it's stronger, but that stuff will catch up to them. I still firmly believe that, but it can make you stay healthy.
Well, I think that shows, you can have somebody who's happy and mentally healthy, who's overweight, but there's still a direct correlation. If you look at the overweight population, we're talking high obesity levels.
Mm-hmm.
Their mortality tables, their life expectancy is way less than somebody who is considered at the appropriate weight. Yeah. And so that's gonna take into effect your whole range of spectrum of people who do think it's a problem, don't think it's a problem, are indifferent. So yes, it has a long-term impact, but how much of an impact?
Yeah, well, that's where we're getting into the conversation of like everything matters and nothing matters. So let's find like a middle ground, because all of this talk made me think about, this is an unrelated study, but they did a recent study that showed, I don't want to get it wrong, let me just talk through it to see when it comes out if I remember it, that smokers with high EPA and DHA, so eating a lot of omega-3 fatty acids from fish, had a better life expectancy than non-smokers who had low levels of that.
It's fun. So it's funny you say that. The 10X Health guy, I'm looking up his name right now, Gary Brecka. He's a guy who runs the 10X Health systems.
Mm-hmm.
There's a recording of him saying that if you're physically active and you smoke and you drink, you'll outlive the person who's not physically active.
Yeah.
And so and that gets into like the whole, it matters and it doesn't matter. If you're the right weight and you do a little, and you just eat right, or maybe you don't even eat right, you eat moderately well, you're at a good BMI, we don't even like BMI, but you're at a good weight, you could be outlived by somebody who smokes and drinks all the time, but goes and has a consistent workout regimen and eats the same way you do. The only difference is they smoke and drink, but they also work out way more than you do. Those two things will make it so they'll live longer than you will.
The point of all of this is to play into that there's a happy medium, and we're getting into a health world space where everything's being demonized. They're making you feel bad for every little thing. And it's like, you want to do the best habits you can, quote unquote, let's come up with a random number, 80% of the time. Because there's a lot of people that do the best habits they can, and then once a year when they eat out or when they eat seed oils once, or so much stress because they think it's killing them. And it's like, no, the person that probably eats 3 times the amount of seed oils as you, but is just happy and comfortable and living well, may outlive you because you are
talking about yourself?
No, you're causing so much stress. But it's crazy because a lot of us go through it in the health world, because I saw a different account talking about this, and at first it aggravated me because I was like, I don't get it. Why are we, quote unquote, promoting or saying it's okay to do these things because they are unhealthy? It's like, I guess we're not really saying it's okay to do these things. We're saying you're going to have just as good a chance, if not better, of a long, healthy life if when they happen, the things that when they happen, say, we'll just say smoking, I don't know, alcohol, whatever you want in there. When they happen, if you don't stress about them, you're going to be fine. So it's tough because the health world, especially with online, we're seeing such a huge shift of so much demonization, so much you have to be perfect, so much this, and all this is going against us.
Are you personally happy with your actions? Are you okay with what you're doing? Do you think you're working towards the best version of yourself? If you do, you probably are. Even if you are eating McDonald's twice a week and you're only working out once a week, but you know that you're doing the right thing and you know you're working towards the right place and you tell yourself that and you have the self-love, it sounds like that is more important than cutting out, adding another workout day or cutting out another cheat day. It's more important that you self-love have the self-love, working towards the best version of yourself and are happy.
Yeah. And everyone's scale is different. That's the thing is the whole point of this conversation is there's not one right way. Like I would say the only two wrong ways are wanting to be 100% perfect and beating yourself up when you're not, and not caring at all and doing every unhealthy habit. I would say those are the only two wrong ways that I feel confident saying. But then everything in between is like where do you want to fall on that scale? Why do you want to fall on that spot? And what are your future goals? Because like you figure those things out. It's like, I want to be more towards the end of quote unquote impossible perfection. But that's because if I'm towards that end, I feel better day to day. And then I can reconcile when I do things that aren't. And the other person might just be like, again, I don't fully agree with this because they got to ask themselves why, but the YOLO person, like you only live once. It's like, sure, if that's really what you believe and makes you happy and you've come to terms with that, you might live a long, happy, healthy life that way. I guess maybe the true YOLO is the not caring at all. So who knows? But, there's those both ends.
Yeah.
All right.
That's interesting, though, that the focus there is on, being present and asking yourself, do I firmly believe that I am working towards a better version of myself? And if the answer is yes, you're probably working towards the best. You're probably in the best health position that you can be in because you're going to continue to improve. But if you're beating yourself up, it's not gonna work out well for you.
Right. Well, that's my only challenge to people that promote or just say you should never worry about eating fast food or this or that. That's my only question to them is, like, why are you doing that? Like, ask yourself why, because in my mind, self-love is taking care of yourself, and that food's not bad. But at the same time, the person that's doing all those things and has no self-love and beats themselves up, it's like, we're also not at a good spot. So yeah, it's hard because
delicate balance.
Such a delicate balance. But to bring us, so what we were going to talk about, so many fun things, but we transitioned into how things are actually happening in the body through the processes. And Justin brought up, and we were going to talk about it, but how chronic stress affects so many pathways. I have a nice diagram here, but we'll start with a very common one. But insulin resistance, high blood sugar. So I'll just read through some things here. When you're under chronic stress, a lot of these processes in the body go up, and I'll explain what they are. But if you think about it, ancient times, we would see a tiger. A lot of stresses we had were acute, quick stresses. So the body would up-regulate a lot of things so we could run, so we could have energy. And stress, I think itself has gotten a quote unquote bad rep because it's not the stress. Like, that's actually very good that those processes happen because they allowed us to run away and live. I think it's our perception to stress, and that acute stress that everyone demonizes is only bad when it happens chronically, which is what's happening today. Like, we are not very different than who we were 100 or 1,000 years ago as humans, but our environment is completely different. So, we are not programmed for this low level chronic stress that we're seeing from social media, jobs, mortgages, all this stuff. And it's causing that acute response to become chronic. And that's when we're seeing a lot of problems. That's kind of the intro there. And that leads into it because one of the things that happens is when we go into a sympathetic state, so more, fight state or flight, our blood sugar goes up and it gets broken down because it wants to shove sugar into the cells so they have energy to run. This causes the need for insulin to rise because when you have sugar in the blood, it can't just go into cells. Insulin needs to transport it into the cells. And then if there's chronic high blood sugar, because you're chronically stressed, your body continually thinks it needs the sugar because think it needs to run away constantly. Eventually these cells kind of turn off to the sugar because they're like, well, we're not even utilizing it. You constantly make it and you keep shoveling it into the cells, but it's not a physical stress. It's a mental stress. So it's not being utilized. It causes a problem. Yeah. So I was wrapping it up, but I have it here so chronic stress can cause insulin resistance because the body continually thinks it's in fight or flight. So it continually thinks it needs to run or fight, and cells can only handle so much sugar before they actually shut down, and they shut down causing insulin resistance because the mitochondria in those cells need a break. So it's the same exact process as if your body is eating too much sugar and doesn't know what to do with it. Again, I think this is the whole thing of people demonize carbs. It's like, I don't think carbs are that bad if we're utilizing them. If we are in an insulin sensitive state, meaning we're fit, we're active, like our body can use those. It's not the carb, it's our body. But the same exact pathway is happening in the mind, even though you're not ingesting a ton of carbs. The mind's finding places in the body, or the body's finding sugar stores and breaking them down and putting them into your blood system so your cells can use them, thinking you're having acute physical stresses, but you're just under chronic mental stress. So I'm out of breath, but that's wild.
No, it is interesting because, when you bring in the fight or flight response and you bring in, that, the caveman mind, the limbic brain sitting there and creating that freeze or flight response or fight response, I suppose. But either one requiring you to have the energy there. And that's what's causing some of these diabetic issues and high insulin issues is the result of your body needing to get away and you just not being able to because you're not moving your body to get rid of it because it's a mental stress. It's not something you actually need to run away from.
Right.
It's typically something you need to deal with on a mental level or just get done at work or, whatever the case may be. There's something on your checklist that you haven't done because you've been putting it off and that's causing you to be stressed out about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no ability to actually go run away from it and burn up that sugar.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that how that plays a role into this piece of the puzzle.
And I can't imagine that it's more prevalent or important than overeating tons of high sugary food that we see in the world. But it explains those weird cases of maybe more fit or thin individuals that have insulin resistance. And you're just thinking how or why, but their lifestyle has extreme amounts of mental stress and that's never looked at. It explains those stranger cases. Right.
Well, and I think it also explains why 10,000 steps or just going for a walk is so pivotal. Because if you're if you're in an office environment or, an environment where you're not up and moving around. So we're talking, white collar jobs, not the blue collar jobs, where you're under a lot of that mental stress, not physical stress, but you're sitting at a desk. So you don't have the opportunity to get away from it. Going for that walk allows you to burn through some of that sugar and some of those, use up some of that insulin that you've produced in order for you to then regulate back down because you've consumed it via the exercise that you've done. That's why the walking pads at a desk, I think, have played such a large role just by, this is all just coming to me right now from what you're saying with these research of it just makes sense that, our bodies put into basically a call for physical response, but our body, it doesn't realize that it's a mental response. So we need to introduce the physical response in order to balance out what our body's producing and telling us to do, but we don't actually take action on.
And that's another reason too why I think people don't believe half of this stuff of when you say, oh, go for a walk at your lunch break, like, how much could that help? But when you're thinking about it, you're like, it could help in terms of exercise. It could help in terms of a mental break. It can help in terms of getting natural light. Like, the simplest things have such a big impact, but they're so hard to believe that they have. But there's so many factors playing in there. Like you said, if you're in an office all day under artificial blue light, constant mental stress, not moving, it's like, yeah, a walk does wonders.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too, because this whole podcast is about how, this whole podcast being this episode, part 1, part 2, however it breaks down, but these episodes being about very little things that make a very large difference. They're almost magnifiers. Going for the walk because of the mental stress capacity, visualizing things, having the right mental mindset magnifies the consequences of these actions. If you're not eating well, but you have the mindset that it's okay, it decreases the impact. If you have the mindset that it's not okay and you're not eating well, that's going to have a worse impact. So it almost seems like mindset is an amplifier of whatever you are doing. So if you're doing something that's negative, but you have a positive mindset, those start to cancel each other out a little bit. But if they're the same, a negative and a negative, or a positive and a positive, those are they're gonna multiply.
Right. I think in terms of diet, it's like the person who's, if you're at terms and okay with everything's not organic and these eggs are just cage free, it's like those are the things where if you're okay with that, it's actually going to be better for you. Like, you need to come to terms with you're doing the best you can at the moment. We don't need to stress out versus the other one. And guess what? We'll play into the financial side here. All of these things are free. They want to tell you how expensive health is. And it's like, master these things.
Yeah. Go for a walk and do some meditation, or, visualize things. That doesn't cost you a penny.
Free. So the other thing that I brought up earlier too, just the pathway here is, so we'll go, like I was saying, a lot of the processes in the body get upregulated. Lipolysis, glucose getting converted to pyruvate, lipolysis, triglycerides into fatty acids, just a bunch of things here that I'm just kind of glossing over. But lipolysis, an important one, triglycerides in the body, people may know that one because it's on, I think, cholesterol test usually when you go into the doctor. But triglycerides get converted into fatty acids into the body. That increases when there's chronic stress. And that increase can lead to or be a cause of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That's something we've seen when people eat too much sugar. But it's crazy because we're seeing this in people that may just have way too much chronic stress. And it was funny because a couple of weeks ago, I got a message from someone that their doctor said they had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And we just thought, that's weird. They're in good shape. They're not overweight. Must have been a mistake. And then I take this course and I'm just seeing that. And I'm like, wild, because I know some other factors around it. It's like that. It's just, that could be a big reason. It's just the stress in your life has just such a huge impact. And I think can explain so many things for the people that think, oh, I'm healthy, why me? Or I'm doing everything right, or why me? Or, it doesn't make sense. It's like, it does. You just got to look a little deeper.
Well, I think even the heart condition issue that I had, like I never got any real answers on that, but I still think about it. And I was definitely at the highest stress load I was ever at in my life at that time point. Mm-hmm. And so I think there was definitely a mental stress load component to it. And this is where I think, there's multiple factors at play here, right? Plus learning now that caffeine consumption pulls magnesium out of your body. Magnesium plays a large role in heart health. Mm-hmm. So at my caffeine levels, because of my stress load and the hours I was working, I was high caffeine levels, depleting my magnesium, not taking a magnesium supplement, coupled with the stress and not having like a positive frame set around that. It was like, I'm at my highest stress point and it is not good. And I'm aware of that. Those things, again, amplified, and a seemingly healthy, fit, physically active, good diet,
early 20s, yeah,
ends up in the hospital with what was perceived as a heart attack, gets a whole bunch of stuff, and actually has a heart issue.
Yeah.
Now it's resolved. And then 6 months later, oh, you don't have a heart issue anymore. It's completely resolved. And it's
weird.
Like, but what
Yeah,
changed?
and that throws you through a loop in itself.
But now that we're talking about this, what changed in that 6 month period? I was working with doctors. I was in the mindset of like, what can I do to get out of this? What can I do to heal myself? And so you're positively framing everything, getting out of that stress load, managing the stress load, being in a positive mindset. And then boom, 6 months later, you get an EKG and an echo, and they come back completely clean, even though the echo was clean originally, but the EKG wasn't. And now I have both clean 6 months later, no problems. And it's like it never happened.
Yeah.
And it's like...
Yeah. Same thing with me senior year of college. It's like, and if anything, it's what I think it is we can even bring it down a level. If you don't, some people don't believe that. It's like at the bare minimum, chronic stress lowers your immune system for other things to come up. You know what I mean? We see this a lot too, of like if people have hidden viruses in their body, meaning they're just kind of stagnant, they're not expressing themselves, but you come under a lot of chronic stress, boom, they have an opportunity to attack. Stress just accelerates other things that your body may have been able to handle. It's crazy because it's nice because it's hard because it's not a blood marker. It's not a word on paper, but it's almost an answer. You know what I mean? To these things that you were just wondering, what the heck happened? How did that happen? It went away and I got no answer. Will it come back? You know what I mean? And this is almost
I think that's the hard part, is that the only way that you can see the quantifiable evidence of this is through research.
Yeah.
You can't see it on yourself because you can't do a split study on yourself. What if I told myself that this was bad? And what if I told myself it was good? What's the outcome? Right. You can't isolate all the variables. And so, like you're saying, it's not. You can see it in group studies. You can see the biomarkers. You can see quantifiable evidence that it does work. But you can't on yourself because you can't isolate all the variables and then A/B test it and say, what if I tell myself it's good? What if I tell myself it's bad?
Which is a great reason to not. And he actually hints a lot, or doesn't hint, hammers this point home in this course a lot, to not be evidence bound, as in don't take randomized controlled studies as the end all be all. Use them as information and mix that in with everything else that it's just a great point of there's limitations to so many of those things.
Well, I would say to somebody who's not a believer, or somebody who maybe is a believer, but it's is this actually going to work for me? Is try it for 6 months. Try it for 6 months and see, does anything change? Do I feel better? Do some of my symptoms go away? Do these things change? If they do, then it probably works for you, and don't question it beyond that. And if it
I also guarantee it will.
And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But it's like one of those things where sometimes we don't need. I think a lot of time in the world we live in, especially with social media and everybody being able to spew just random information, we look for somebody in the white coat or somebody with letters after their name. I mean, it's the whole reason why I got letters after my name.
Yeah. Was
so that people would be able to go and say, oh yeah, they are an expert in their field. Okay, I can trust what they're saying. And it's like, you don't need that though. In most scenarios, you don't need that. You don't need a doctor to sit here and tell you, if you get your mindset in a positive frame of mind, that'll work out for you. But I think, unfortunately, that's kind of the world we live in, where people want confirmation. They want that reassurance. Yeah. And that's why they go to the doctor when they have a cold, or they bring their baby to the ER because, it's got a cold. And they go into the back and they're like, there's not really anything I can do for you. Your baby has a cold. But they want to hear that from a doctor, that your baby has a cold, your baby doesn't have some crazy disease.
Yeah. It goes along with, too, what you're saying earlier of we accept the negative bias way more than the positive, in terms of when people hear, it's weird to me when people hear something advice, let's say advice from a non-doctor, which is hey, meditate, go for a walk, and eat whole foods. They scrutinize it and they question where's the resource, where's the information, where's the study? But someone's hey, take this statin for heart disease, and oh, okay. You know what I mean? I feel the easy, quick, cheap things just get so much more scrutiny than the others, and maybe because they're FDA approved and they're gone through trials, but those all have.
Well, and I think part of that is just that's convenience, right? That's convenience. It's easier to take a pill and hope that that's going to work.
And it probably will because of the
because you believe that it will. It probably will work. Then it's just one of the side effects, one of the negative implications that are there, just de-amplified because you have a positive frame of mind there. But one of the long-term plays. But it works both ways, just like that. You could be taking something that has a ton of side effects, and maybe you don't have the side effects because you think it's going to work. But if you thought it didn't work and you were worried about the side effects, you might have all the side effects.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's crazy how it works even in a situation like that. It can combat the negative. But I think the other part is that because it's convenient to just pop a pill, that's so much easier than training your brain to frame things in a positive mindset for something that you have a negative mindset about. Because it's very easy. If you have a positive mindset about medications and you're big on medications, just take a medication no matter what the problem, you have a positive mindset about that. It's not hard to continue down that pathway, but changing pathways is much harder.
Right. We'll wrap up here. Let me just give a couple more, since that's what we're going to do in this episode, like exact processes in the body of how chronic stress can affect them. We'll just fly through these because we've gone over a lot of good stuff, but we talked about insulin resistance, how that can happen. That can also lead to a decrease in sex hormone binding globulin. And again, we'll dive into this stuff later. So if people or you have questions, we can go into it, but I just want to get to the endpoints of these. That decrease allows more free estrogen in the body, which increases thyroid hormone binding globulin. That binds to your thyroid, and that causes a decrease in thyroid action, making it harder to burn body fat, meaning, the chronic stress causing insulin resistance messes with your thyroid. We see it also messing with the thyroid through another pathway, through 5-deoxydenase. It's a tough one, but that's an enzyme. All that big complicated word is an enzyme that converts inactive thyroid to active thyroid. So, we're seeing a lot of these, again, big words. We can jump into them more later. But all of this chronic stress, all of these things in the body is showing up in pathways in the body that we just aren't relating to chronic stress. We're relating it to food, environment. And, we need to start looking at all of this, all of these stressors, all of your mental health, all of your past traumas as possible causes for why we may be unhealthy today. And it's just crazy because we're now getting so much of the information. And the last one, to just kind of tie all this in, is chronic stress will mess with your methylation. What that means is if you can't methylate neurotransmitters like serotonin and melatonin, they're going to be messed up. So it's like stress is literally causing neurotransmitter problems, in which everyone can relate to because they're hot topic words: dopamine, serotonin. It's crazy because it works in the reverse too. Like neurotransmitter problems can cause stress, so it's just crazy.
Yeah, it's wild how it works from both sides. Like, it's not like this is impacting everybody. The question is, how are you having it impact you? Are you framing it in a positive or are you framing it in a negative? Because if you're not doing anything with it, either you're naturally a more positive person or you're naturally a more negative person. And that's what's driving this right now.
And it's an uphill battle. If you're a negative person, you gotta find a lot of ways. Maybe we'll go into those, but you gotta switch it. It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. For sure. I've definitely gone through bouts where I've been on that side of it, and I would say a morning gratitude list is the way to start digging yourself out of that hole.
There's a love-hate relationship with it because some days you have a bad day and you're just like, what is this even doing? But other days when something goes right, especially something goes right that you wrote of like, that would make today great. You think to yourself, like, you know what? I think I noticed it more because I've been writing it down. Whereas something might,
that has been
that's the kicker.
Is it's like that reticular activating system saying like, I said I'm going to be grateful for this, and this happens to me a lot more than I realized because I was ungrateful for it until I actually put it down and was like, I actually do care about this, and I should pay attention a little more to it.
So then you're kind of like, oh crap, it got me. I got to keep doing it.
Right. Yeah.
That's good.
The bad days are tough. The bad days are tough because you write it down. The tough part's that end of the day one where you have to say,
it's like, what did you learn? And I'm just like, I learned that today stunk.
Yeah. Well, and I usually what I do is I learn that I do not have the patience for this, or I don't have,
that's a good one.
That's a lot of times what I end up putting down is like, what did I learn? I learned that this irritates the hell out of me.
Yeah.
That's what I learned.
But you know what that end of the day really helped me with too, because it's what did you learn and highlights from the day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you don't realize the effect, even if it's so tiny, going to bed on a negative. When I do that, I have a million negative things going in my head. The day went terrible, and it forces you to write 2 positives down through the day. You're falling asleep on the positive,
Right.
Huge difference.
Right.
So,
for sure.
Thanks for listening to our podcast.
We hope this helps you on your balance freedom journey.
Please share your thoughts in the comments section below.
Until next time, stay balanced.